Oh, you want to play psycho killer? Can I be the helpless victim?
Cross your eyes and scream, man. Scream for your life.
I know what you're thinking. Freak, geek, nerd. We've heard it all. We're cosplayers. A couple times every year, we make our pilgrimage to the cons.
Welcome to the regional qualifier for the national competition.
The federal government has declared a state of martial law and has warned all citizens to stay indoors. As the now confirmed outbreak begins to spread outside the border of Los Angeles.
So this movie, ZombieCon Volume 1, I saw that you had an original ZombieCon movie as well. Was it the same cast and crew? Like, how do those movies compare?
So it's kind of a snafu that's really kind of hinging on IMDb. So we filmed in 2016 and we had gotten through post-production with a very rough cut. Same footage, same actors, same filming and everything, but a working copy and a rough cut. We didn't have enough money in our budget to get like test screenings or audience screenings or anything like that. And I'd seen Waking Sleeping Beauty, the Disney documentary. And I thought, well, you know, Beauty and the Beast submitted a rough cut to film festivals. I think it was the New York International Film Festival, and it did great. And that was like a huge advertising thing. And they got an audience reaction. We could do that. Well, lo and behold, we're not Disney and we're not Beauty and the Beast. So when we submitted our working copy to a number of festivals and ended up getting in, and it was accepted as a working copy, it was shown as a working copy. As soon as it got nominated for and then really won an award at the Orlando International Film Festival, IMDb immediately tagged it as released, which we were still in post-production on it. There were VFX shots missing. The audio wasn't done. The editing wasn't done. The color correct wasn't done. So it was a very rough version. So we didn't think anything of it. We kept working on the film and we had eventually kind of completed it. And then COVID happened. And I was like, well, I'm here in the studio. I'm kind of going crazy. There's nothing else to do. So I started basically over from scratch and redid the entire film again. Fast forward to about 2000, I think, I don't know, whatever year we got our sales agent. So about 2024. And he saw the IMDb for ZombieCon 2018. And he was like, you know, what is this? Explain it to me, etc. Go through the whole spiel. And he's like, well, this isn't going to work with a distributor. They're going to want a new movie to sell because no one's going to want to see a movie from 2018. I'm like, well, it wasn't ever released. You're seeing it. This is the release version. So he said, let me talk to IMDb and see what they can do. The IMDb was very like, no, if we make an exception for you, we've got to make an exception for everyone else. And I'm like, it's not really an exception. It kind of follows like the whole 10 pages of laws that you have or bylaws that you have on your site. Because I did read all that. And I was like, I traded like 600 emails with the IMDb staff. And I feel so sorry for those folks. I apologize. I was just trying to be as accurate as possible. So our sales agent said, okay, we can't get them to change it. But if we change the name of the movie, because this is a different movie, that's a fair way to re-update it because it is a totally different movie. It was using the same footage, but this is now a complete version. It's a different cut. Everything's been redone. Let's call it something else. And we were like, well, we've written four other like parts of the series. So this could easily be a volume 1. And ZombieCon Volume 1 was born. IMDb accepted that and was like, okay, this is good. And that's why we have 2 confusing IMDb listings.
It's almost like ZombieCon's like the lost tape, like something that no one will probably ever see. It's such an older, rougher version of the film that never was and never got released. Yeah.
I like what you said previously. It's like people have said, oh, are you going to ever release that version? And we actually have a couple versions that we showed at like Anime Expo and Los Angeles Comic-Con over the years. And maybe, 10 years or something, we'll put together a compilation DVD with like the 6 different versions of ZombieCon and when it premiered.
The multiverse of ZombieCon cuts.
That's perfect. That's awesome. You're not the first ones that have told me that, like, from indie horror directors, how IMDb has been difficult and like they automatically put your your project up without consulting you or anything, which is, it's just weird. I didn't realize they did that.
It is a little frustrating, particularly because their whole shtick and goal is to be the most accurate, like the database. Yeah. And I get that. That's a great goal. We need that. But when its rules actively prevent that, especially for smaller films that don't, have everything so streamlined, it then gets really tangled.
Right. I think after Amazon acquired them, it's just corporatized. So anytime these big corporations come through, they're solving every problem with a sledgehammer unless it's another big corporation that they're doing business with all the time. And I'm sure if we had $100 million movie with $100 million marketing budget, we'd have some high priced attorney or something be wagging their finger at them, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, we'd happily change it for you." But Erin and Kyle, we're not getting very far with IMDb.
And blessing in disguise too, because we've gotten a lot of good feedback about the new title, and we like it better as well. ZombieCon Volume 1. So all's well that ends well too.
Yeah, no, it's a really good name. It definitely, there's room for sequels with that. Especially I like comic books. And so it just reminds me of a comic book.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Which is it also, it's a very anime inspired movie. So the manga, comic book, obviously heavily inspired by comics as well. Again, like you said, it kind of works for both of those angles, which is just kind of one of the things with, I think, filmmaking. So often, especially indie filmmaking, you're going to have a problem. No matter how well you plan, even if everything seems perfect, something is going to happen that's going to create utter chaos at more than one moment. And you can either kind of pull your hair out about it or roll with it creatively. And if you roll with it creatively, I think you sometimes find the quote unquote magic. Like in Jaws, I always use this as an example. If the shark worked, we wouldn't have that movie in the way it is today. And so it's just kind of trying to be creatively positive and, working out the problem.
Yeah, 100%. So when I looked at your pages, I saw that, at least for Erin, for you, I saw that you've have quite a few credits for acting. So are you is that your biggest role that you play within the film industry is as an actress?
Started as a child actor in Atlanta, and I was represented when I probably was 8 or 9 years old when I got an agent, kind of fell into it. Always loved acting, but fell into getting professionally represented and dove head first. Absolutely loved it. And I'd gotten, a lot of credits and a lot of opportunities, feature films, major studio, and TV shows, Vampire Diaries, Revolution, Quarantine 2 Terminal, a lot of horror, funny enough. By the time that I was out in LA, I graduated early from college and still now pursuing it full time. I was starting to get burned out, especially just by the audition process. And I wanted to step into more of a creative role and take a little bit more control of my own career and my own opportunities. And that's when Kyle and I were dating, and we started very small scale at first, just with some camera equipment, a short film, a web series or two, some demo reels and commercials for other people. And we just kept building up until we made a streaming service back in 2015, which was kind of like a competitor to YouTube, except insanely underfunded. And at the time there was only Netflix. And so I remember describing to people what a streaming platform was. And I myself felt like a fraud saying it, no, it's going to be big. Kyle always is 5 years ahead. He's this is what all the studios are going to be doing. It's the natural progression. So past that, which was awesome, except underfunded and didn't quite last like we wanted it to, we wanted to make a feature film and really cement ourselves as a production company. Enter ZombieCon and the script and Indiegogo, pre-production, production, and then the 10-year post-production hell. So I started with just acting, and I always wanted to continue to act, but I definitely was not wanting to be sitting on the sidelines, just waiting and doing the same thing I'd been doing already for over a decade. I was ready and enjoyed producing, occasionally co-writing, but mostly with this production company producing. First assistant directing too.
I was going to say, she also edits all of my scripts.
That's true.
Which make me look like an intelligent human being. So I'm very thankful for that.
I'm very passionate about editing screenplays. And books as well. So we really pair well together. We complement each other on our roles.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Husband and wife. You've got writer, editor. We need both of those roles.
Yes.
So I also saw that you do the casting director. You have like quite a few credits with that as well. Are they things that you guys have done together, or is that like outside projects with other production companies as well?
Yeah, those were our production company and our streaming platform, from the short films to the web series to the movie ZombieCon. And we're actually also working on a vertical micro horror series right now. We're in pre-production, but I have enjoyed casting after, over a decade of auditioning, getting to be behind the desk and understanding completely where the actor's coming from, how they're feeling going in, and knowing then with the casting, it's not just their talent. Especially on an indie film set, you're really looking to be a good judge of character, which thankfully I think I have been so far. Is this person going to be good to work with? Are they going to be fun on set, easygoing, fit with the rest of us, good energy? And that's half the battle with the actors.
For you, Kyle, I see you are mainly in the director's seat a lot of the times. And you did a lot of like the TV series and things. How did those help you with directing ZombieCon Volume 1?
Each directing thing that I've done, you always learn something new. I'm a big advocate of you're, especially in the arts, if you're really passionate about it, you'll never be like totally complete. Even at your last project you ever do, it still won't be quote unquote like your best. Trying to learn something new from every experience and take that to the next experience just makes that next experience that much better. When we had $60,000 for ZombieCon, to me, it was like, that's more money than I've ever seen for a project, like times, I don't know, a ton. So we had like a couple $100 on the previous stuff. So I was like, we could do anything with this. And, you learn that, of course, you still have limitations. Like you talk to your makeup artist, you're like, hey, Joe, you're amazing. I would love to have 30 zombies in this sequence. How can we do that? He's like, you want to go hire 15 more makeup artists for that? I'm like, we can't afford that at all. So again, a learning process, but having had that background, it just let us work that much more effectively and efficiently and actually get something usable on film. And also, I think stress management is a big thing that you learn throughout the course of the process. You're constantly, the more pieces you add, the more stress you add. We were talking about earlier with like creative solutions. You could easily be like, I'm pulling my hair out, I'm going nuts, and like start running around in circles in the lawn. Or you could just like take a seat, have a beer and be like, okay, I'm going to find a solution, even though it doesn't seem like anything is going to present itself. That's just something that I've kind of learned throughout the course of the time where, you just have to do that. So one thing leads to another.
And it's nice that you guys have each other also for like, I'm sure that support, that stress relief, and like any venting, anything you have to do like that.
Oh yeah. Erin is the best partner. Like we, especially for producing, I don't know if you touched on this, but like on set, we would divvy up responsibilities where I would be, the crew for ZombieCon was our biggest crew to date. And we only had at best, I think like 5 people on crew. So it was a super tiny crew. And I had a number of responsibilities and hats that I was wearing, and especially with that ensemble with, sometimes like 8 actors, especially like that hallway scene where they're going to the con. It's just a complicated shoot, especially we're in physical locations. It's not like we're in a studio. We can't remove a wall. And I wanted to shoot it on really nice glass, and we could only afford one lens for our budget because they're just super expensive. So we had one Zeiss CP2 that was 28 millimeters. So I think with the camera was like a Super 35. So like it was like a 32 millimeter. It came out. We shot on the Canon C300 Mark.
So it took 30 days for you guys to record everything?
Yeah, it was about a 30-day principal photography shoot. And then we had, because we had used half the budget to acquire the equipment, we were able to then kind of protect ourselves. So over the course of the next 9 or 8 years, or maybe 7 years, we would go ahead and get like little insert shots. And again, we were living in that apartment. So like that opening scene with the photograph and the blood spraying on it, that was probably shot in 2022.
So many little pieces that as the edit was changing and the film was changing, this would look better. We need an insert here. And especially with the intro, we have had probably like 4 or 5 completely different openings for this film.
One we got to do fakes and 04. I had this whole, there's a mystical, on the DVD, there's this extended opening that shows like kind of the history of like the stone and stuff. And long story short, we had to use fakes fake snow for this, which was my first time using fake snow, but we were using it inside of our own apartment, which created a horrific mess. Because as soon as the fake snow hits anything with dirt, it goes from being white to like this nasty gray, like slush color. Like if anyone's ever been to New York in the middle of winter and like looked at the sidewalk, it looked like that. So
we always had one of us, as Kyle is like behind the camera. We got an actor, you know, the Rocket's really just usually me or Manny, and then Manny who plays Rocket. And I would trade places, collecting the snow at the end of the take and putting it in front of a fan as it gets increasingly more gray to be like thrown out at us. My character was riding a horse against the green screen for this as well. So I had like a broom or something, and I'm sitting there fake, you know, bouncing around. It was like the most indie thing you could imagine. But I think with the extended opening on the DVD, it actually pulled together pretty nicely.
I think the horse actually worked pretty well.
I was proud of my motion.
The gag we used to like pull off a horse, I just got one stirrup. So you see Erin's foot like seating into one stirrup, and then we just do like an extreme close on her, you know, riding through the snow, kind of mimicking the movement. I think it worked pretty well.
That's hilarious. So that sounds so, it's like very improv type of
the things you never think that you'll be doing.
So I'll have to watch the DVD version with the extended opening so I can see all this like dirty snow flying at people.
Oh, yes. And you'll have to let me know what you think of my horse galloping motion.
Yes,
I think it made
I'm
it
very
into
excited for that. That's awesome. The crew that you had, are these your friends, or are they people that you had hired on and like they auditioned for these roles?
So I'll take the first half of that and then you follow up. Yep. So the main four, obviously Erin and I were dating, so that was a no-brainer. I think we were engaged at the time, so that, you know, that was easy. Manny, who plays Rocket, was a partner in our production company, and we had gotten to know him over the course of that Mew Now TV experience, and he went from being kind of an assistant to just a part of the team over the course of that process. Javier, who's played by Christian Casillas, and Punky, played by Punky Johnson. I actually met the two of them at my first acting class when I first got to LA. Punky and I actually met in my very first acting class there, and it was her first acting class there. We had just both literally moved there. We moved into the same like apartment building-esque type thing, but we were both in single unit apartments. And it was like wildly expensive. It was like pre-furnished apartments and all this stuff. It's a pretty famous place that's like next Oakwood Apartments next to Universal Studios over there. But it's like very much like set up to be a temporary kind of, you know, place for corporate people and, you know, people who aren't going to be there very long. But it's cheaper than a hotel room, but still way more expensive than like a regular apartment. We figured this out and we're like looking around and we're like, well, we can get a place with a really cool view like down on Wilshire Boulevard for like half the price if we go in on a 2-bedroom. So we ended up moving in together. And then we moved a couple of times and, you know, stayed together until she got a house and I was going in a different direction and got the apartment. So that was an awesome experience. And Christian, like I was saying, we met at that exact same acting class about a month later when we got to like the advanced class. So we just kind of met up at that point and we kind of worked together on all kinds of weird little stuff like films that I wouldn't even classify as short films. And then when we got into the Mew Now TV and short film stuff, Punky and Christian were a part of like all of that. Christian's held a boom pole for a lot of the projects. He's played a number of the characters. Punky as well has played a number of the characters. And we did a little like comedy stand-up show with her called Talking Points. And so we've just been kind of working together in family. And then in terms of other casting,
most of the other cast, we did cast some friends that we'd worked with before who were actors, but most of the other cast we held professional casting call and in-person auditions in Los Angeles. Like he was saying, how Christian plays Javier has helped out a lot. Christian was my casting assistant for those days in person, and I was running casting. And I ran all my decisions by Kyle, so it was, you know, his final say as well, but I don't think he vetoed anyone. Found just really great people. Almost everyone in AnimeCon West, for example, that was cast as well. They are the fun story, though, because we wanted real cosplayers for the con and wearing their own cosplays and bring that authenticity. Yeah. And so I was contacting a bunch of cosplayers on Instagram way back in 2016 and found a bunch who said, okay, I'm wearing my own cosplay in a feature film. Sign me up. We're at a fake con. Awesome. Where do I go? And so that was like, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And our crew for this film. One or two of them were friends who'd worked with before, and then a couple others who were really like professional at their craft, and we'd met, as a recommendation through other friends, but we really didn't know until we started filming, and we quickly just became so tight.
When we were still in Los Angeles, we would still do like, I would say, at least once a year, if not twice a year, we would get together with everyone kind of individually, but we'd do like a big group dinner. Yeah, it's just a fantastic group of people. We really like became like a little family out there, which in LA, it's a place where a lot of transplants go. So you kind of find your family when you're out there, and we definitely found ours.
Yeah. What made you want to go with cons in general? Do you guys dress up for cons a lot? Like, have you ever entered competitions in groups like that?
So I personally have never entered a competition, but I grew up in like the early 90s, like in the New Jersey area. So I'd gone to like, back in the 90s, cons were not what they are today. You didn't have them in every state. They were hard to find, and they were kind of a much more niche thing. But my dad is a huge like sci-fi horror guy. So he was like kind of immersing me in the culture. And there was one convention that was driving distance from our house that I got to go to twice. And then my second like awesome con experience growing up was we went on a family trip to Las Vegas. They had a Star Trek convention at the same time that we were there. So we went to that, and that was like in the Hilton or something. And that was like my first like genuine, like massive con with like all the vendors and tables and the ceiling. Like I remember as a kid, the ceiling seemed like it was like 600 feet high. I know it obviously wasn't 600 feet high, but like, little kid vision, like everything is giant and like really impressive. And people are walking around in what I now know is cosplay, but like just costumes and everything. I would go to like Disney or something, and I would get dressed up. Like this is my first, I guess, technical cosplay. I would always wear sweatsuits. My mom always wanted me to dress in like button down shirts and stuff for like nice occasions. I was like, no, like I like these like just very comfortable sweatsuits. And a way I think that she kind of worked around that, but also got me into my first cosplay, was to be able to dress up like Indiana Jones. So I was a huge fan. And so I wore the khakis and a button down shirt and the leather jacket in the 90-degree heat in Florida, and went to like the stunt show spectacular with the fedora and everything. And there's some great photos from that. But that was like my first being a fan of anime. I tried to just experience as much of the culture as possible. And getting to LA and making this movie was like really where my like renaissance period with cons came, because prior to this movie, every extra dollar I had would go to like camera equipment or something to do with trying to quote unquote make it. And, cons are expensive. The tickets alone are expensive. And then you get there and it's like the coolest stuff that you can't buy anywhere else. Like you're going to spend money. The food is expensive. The parking is expensive. Everything about a con is expensive, worth it, but expensive. But when I was looking at like, I can get a lens for $100 or I can go to a con, I would always choose the lens or something like that. But once we made the movie, I was talking to Erin and I was like, well, we're in post-production. We don't really need any more equipment. And these could be advertising opportunities. We can go to cons. We could tell people about the movie. And that started us down this road of exhibiting at conventions, showing the movie at conventions. And because of that, we got to go to like I'd probably say almost every convention that took place in the Los Angeles area, big and small, like all the way down to people who are just starting their own like Pokemon conventions, like on the beach, where it would just be like a small contest, like on the beach, nothing official. Like those are some of the coolest. And then, of course, the big ones like LA Comic-Con and Anime Expo, like I said before. And we got to go to San Diego Comic-Con because it was driving distance. And we're like, maybe we can get a ticket online or like scalp something. And we managed to scalp a ticket or something. And we got in. I think we went twice. And that was like the coolest experience. Probably the coolest con experience ever, because it was just like something I dreamed about for like my entire life. And like you're finally there, and they do a great job of like integrating the whole city with the con.
I was going to ask about like special effects. Like there's a lot of special effects in this movie, especially when it comes to like the makeup and the zombies at the end. There's like some like boils on the zombie's face. There's, some ripping of like chunks of flesh. There's a lot of blood in this movie. How many gallons of blood do you think you went through?
We went through about 5 gallons of blood, and we had about 6. And I was just talking to our makeup artist, Joseph Trebesco, literally like 2 days ago about this. And he was like, yeah, I felt like I would have been happy using 15 gallons of blood. That would have been like, every scene would have looked like Carrie, like in the gym scene.
And I'll jump in here for Claire as my acting contribution to this movie, producer Erin knew all the details of this movie, I guess, except for what his plan was with our SFX artist for the gore, because I did not know how much blood there was going to be, how much gore. So when we filmed that first scene with Claire stabbing Devin, my ex-boyfriend, and all that blood is like being shot at me and it's everywhere, I didn't know we were going full face even. Like, I just wasn't privy to the details as an actor, as I shouldn't have been. So yeah, and I think the other Rockets were pleasantly, especially for our acting abilities, the adrenaline, the shock, the fear that you see, like, it's all real. We didn't have any time for screen tests and rehearsals on that. And so the first time we each got a face full of blood, it was the first time. There's nothing like that first time.
Nice. So it's like authentic shock. Yeah.
Oh, yes. What
was the blood made out of?
So that was stuff that Joe bought at I guess he had his secret stash of stores that are like known through the SFX community. And he had different jugs for different things. I have no idea what they were actually made out of, but there were specific jugs for, okay, this is what I'm going to apply when it's a scene, when it's dried blood. This is the stuff that we're using for wet blood. This is the stuff that we're going to be, I think he had special blood that he either made or he purchased for the spraying blood that was a little bit thinner. So it would work through. He used actually a weed sprayer to spray all the actors with the blood, just something you buy off Amazon, like for $20, those hand compressed weed sprayers. And he'd put the blood in there. He'd pump it up. He had the little like nozzle gun thing and he just, be right off camera spraying relentlessly.
And it was the professional stuff. I mean, he told me recently when I was asking that it was originally the brand and type he was using was developed for the Harry Potter films back in the early 2000s. The creme de la creme. I don't know how much blood there was in Harry Potter, but it was developed at that time. And if it was good enough for, the Warner Brothers Harry Potter adaptation, good enough for ZombieCon.
Well, and in line with Harry Potter, Joe is actually he's a wizard when it comes to special effects. Those boils and those like rip chunked skin effects that you referred to earlier. Mm-hmm. He cast all of that he made molds and then created his own latex prosthetics. Specific to like what I was asking for, but those are all like custom handmade designs that you can't like buy anywhere or find anywhere that he was making in the bathroom, which was kind of his laboratory. We didn't have a lot of space and he retrofitted one of the bathrooms to be like a special effects factory. So
Nice. That's awesome. And it's fun too. Like, special effects are so much fun. I feel like they're coming back this year in a really big way. And I hope that continues.
I hope so too. It's, I think that VFX is great. Mm-hmm. And I think it's great, especially for filmmakers on a budget that can't do things practically. You need an airplane in your scene or something like that. Like, it's a fantastic tool to have to just explain the story. But I do feel like people have leaned so hard into the VFX. We've lost a lot of those miniature models and puppeteering stuff that, it's not perfect for everything, but there are things that you can do with miniatures, with SFX and prosthetics that look better than VFX. And I think that the cost is probably quasi-similar, if not even cheaper for some of the SFX stuff, and getting it in camera. You have total control over it. And with the lighting and everything, it solves so many problems in post-production. So I'm totally on board with you there. I wish it would be like much more used. And I wish VFX was only used when absolutely necessary.
So we get our conflict in the movie. It's with the exes and people being like jerks. What is the word that you get that's used?
Assholes.
Assholes. Yes. I use the nice word. So like, what made you focus on assholes as the good? I mean, it's like good versus evil, but focusing on it from like the lens of a con. You see a lot of the perceptions, like these stereotypes of like, oh, you're just a dork, you're all these things. And is it something where you had those experiences like growing up where people would kind of like stereotype you or kind of be bullies? I
mean, that definitely happened to me a bit in elementary school because I was a fan of like my dad. Like I said before, my dad was a huge sci-fi horror guy. He was also a huge Marvel fan, and like, he grew up buying the comics for like, a nickel and like had all the original stuff. And back in the 90s, again, again, which I know sounds weird today, a lot of people didn't know what Marvel was. Like, you could talk about Spider-Man or Iron Man specifically was like not one of their like key characters. Like, a lot of people knew the Fantastic Four, but a lot of the characters we think of as household names today, you go to school and talk about it, and, you know, people will be like, oh, what are you talking about? You're a loser. Like, let's talk about, you know, the player on the, you know, Mets or something. So I think a little bit of it stems from that as kind of like the Big Bang. Yeah, like that's like but then like I'm not really like too eaten up about that. It was really just also trying to find a way to obviously create villains, make it socially like understandable, do a little bit of social commentary, you know, because I do feel like being an asshole is a bit of a choice. Like, I think there are a lot of people who they make excuses for why they act in a certain way or do a certain thing, but they're ultimately the ones making that choice. And I do feel like, you know, it's important to kind of shine a light on that type of stuff and say, hey, you can also choose to, you know, if you're turning, you know, right, you could choose to turn left. And that's something that's always a possibility. So a little bit of that. And then the kind of universal understanding of assholes. Like, everyone knows an asshole. Everyone can think of someone who they've had a bad experience with. That's human life. That's human nature. That's, you know, love for it to be a utopia. It's not, it never will be. So it's just part of life and part of, you know, what we're all dealing with on the planet. So I felt like in terms of a bad guy, quote unquote, it served as a universal, like, understandable bad guy where everyone could kind of get down with it and be like, you know, from whatever side that they were watching the movie from, be like, I know an asshole. I get it. I can, you know, follow up with this. So
yeah, 100%. The plot device of like defeating the zombies, it was, instead of through the head, it was through the heart. And that had to do with, like, I'm guessing, like, the emotional aspect of being an asshole. And you have to, so you would go to the heart instead of the head.
That's 100%. It was like wanting to pay homage to all of the movies that I grew up with, zombie movies and everything, but also kind of make it our own and turn it into like this kind of anime type centric, you know, movie. More or less. And in trying to find that originality, you know, pairing with the kind of asshole idea, it was, well, you know, the head controls the spinal cord, and that's how we get a lot of these like neurological, biochemical spill zombies. And because ours are kind of emotional based, I just felt like the center for that was the heart. And the natural conclusion was then, okay, well, these zombies are controlled from their heart because it's the thing that has changed them.
The comedy aspect of wanting to have our characters who, of course, are in general movie, cosplay, comic book culture, like, they know you stab a zombie in the head and you go for that, and then boom, in real life, it's not what actually works. Having that moment of comedy and showing, you know, that they're in on it and the tropes didn't work out in real life, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's really fun. Especially like seeing you like put the knife into the head, and it's like, I definitely had a moment of like, why didn't that work? And then when you got this samurai sword, that wasn't a real sword, I'm sure. Or maybe it was.
They were like kind of dulled down, obviously. You know, it wouldn't have killed anyone, but they were not like blunt. They definitely, you know, had some sharpness to them. They were not prop, they were heavy. And for that scene specifically, Kyle stood where Devin, the actor, actually was, you know, in frame going to be. And I'm charging directly at camera and at Kyle. And the floor is already slick with blood. I'm wearing platform wedge sneakers that have no traction. I am very aware that we, just like the shot before it, we've got one shot to make this work. We don't have time to reset, clean the entire set, me shower and blow drying. No. And so I'm charging at, hoping I do not slip and impale Kyle and the camera, which both would be horrible, honestly. For the film, we can't lose the camera in particular. Kyle's, we can't lose him either. But, you know, it just, thankfully it worked out. I didn't slip. But yeah, the swords were pretty sharp. They were pretty heavy too.
I mean, you definitely held it with like confidence. I was like, oh, she's going to use the sword. And the way, I mean, that scene is just like shot so well, where it's got you in the center going at it. When it goes through and it like almost hits the friend, it was really, it was really funny. Yeah, it almost hits Rocket. So my next question on here is, what made you go with the magic crystal? Was that just like a trope you're playing off of? I'm sure it is.
We went through a litany of kind of ideas of, well, you know, it could be like a mystical thing that they find, but a lot of these things that have already been done. And again, the story was written before we knew that this whole Marvel, like, Power Stone, Infinity, like, war thing was going to happen, which in retrospect is like, oh, well, I guess that was done too. But we settled on rocks and gems mainly, I think, because I've had a weird obsession my entire life with translucent, like, gemstones. Not because of monetary value, just even, like, pieces of plastic that are translucent and, like, shiny and rocks and stuff, and like used to collect rocks as a kid in quartz. I've just always loved them. There's been an appeal to that about them. As soon as we kind of landed on a rock being the idea, because we had a bunch of the salt rock lamps in our house at the time, and that's actually the basis for the stone. I just used a bunch of translucent spray paint and layered in pieces of like thread and stuff to give it kind of veins. And as soon as we created that, I quickly created like a backstory for the stones. Again, it's in that opening that we referred to earlier.
When it comes to the music, I found the music to be very funny. How did you get that music? It was very much like punk rock, Sum 41, Yellow Card, Good Charlotte.
I love the sound because all those bands you just mentioned are like, that's my entire childhood. So like for me, I was like, this is perfect. And we then found out they had a catalog of all these fantastic songs that like no one had heard of. I certainly hadn't. And I was like, can we license these for the movie? And I mean, some of them, like especially the end credit song Demon, which the song is telling the story of like the movie. It was just one of those happy accidents where my dad found these folks. They had great music, allowed us to license it, and it just worked.
So are they still a band?
They are. Yeah. They're out of Nashville now. I think they're working on or have just released a new album, but they're called Monday's Mona Lisa. And I would highly recommend anyone check them out. They're fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, the music is really fun and really adds to it. Everything is just so playful. It's a really fun movie to watch. And then the blood and the gore and everything, it all pairs really well together.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think we had a ton of fun making it. Not so much fun in post-production, but a ton of fun actually making it for sure.
Yeah, I think that's how it usually goes, I would say.
Yeah. Post-production is a lonely process. That's for sure.
There's a lot of really funny lines about like whenever you guys realize it's like the assholes, the characters start listing off like different assholes that they have in their life, like the neighbor and all these things. Like, who came up with a lot of the comedic lines?
I have to take credit for that. That was mostly me. I have no idea where the Pilates line came from. That was just
the Pilates instructor.
I don't know why. I've never been to. I think actually I did do Pilates once, and I almost broke my back doing it. But I just thought that was like something that would be totally unexpected coming from Punky's character and just be very funny in that moment. So
no, it was very funny. It was like, it makes you start thinking of like, oh yeah, like all these people, if they would be the zombies. Rocket's mom is such a great character. She's very funny. So that was someone that auditioned for the role. That wasn't someone's mom.
So that was no one's mom, but Nicole McCauley, who plays Rocket's mom, we met her through Christian Casillas, who recommended her for the role. And she came over to our house and we were doing kind of a little bit of a script read, 6 hours and a bottle of tequila later. We were all like hugging it out and she was already part of the family. We're like, you're in.
You fit perfectly. You're our mama bear. Like you're part of the Big Squid family. It was so meant to be. And she was so great. Thankfully, we've worked with her a number of times. Obviously, we're great friends, but she's a fantastic actress and she's an incredible makeup artist as well.
She was definitely your con mom that would, everyone's going to get their costumes made. I really love that piece too, because like I haven't really made too many of my own costumes, but in the beginning of the movie when they're like cutting everything out and showing how they make the costumes and the weapons and everything. It was just a lot of fun. Have you guys ever made your costumes like from scratch like that?
Well, I gotta give huge props to Kyle here because he was actually in the pre-production. Aside from everything else he was already handling in our apartment, he was getting all of the EVA foam weapons. He was designing them. He was getting the templates made, cutting them out, sanding them, painting them. Like Punky's giant gun that she wears in the first cosplay, all of our Rockets foam armor, all the pieces and little designs that are hung up. template wise, anything cosplay related around the apartment. That was all Kyle.
Hobby shoulder pads.
Hobby shoulder pads. The only like cosplay other than AnimeCon West and those cosplayers, the extras bringing their own, the yellow jumpsuits at the con. His mom actually made those, which I think is just another nod and a fun like Inception moment since Rocket's mom in the film makes the costumes.
So the character,
Yes.
Rocket, I thought he was going to turn into a zombie from the beginning. I was surprised that he was not a zombie. And then he kind of comes to realize he is an asshole. But then he he's got this kind of come to moment of resurrecting himself. What was the goal with that character?
Goal was to, give it a little bit more of a, complex storyline as opposed to just like good versus evil, like you talked about before. We're dealing with such an ambiguous concept like assholes, which again, I think is really in the way you make a decision. You can make this, you could make the exact same decision, but why did you make that decision? Right.
Yeah.
And Rocket is kind of like my version of a very logical person who, isn't sure. Is he making these decisions because, logically he knows, like, let's use the example of him in the caves where he's, talking to Punky and he's like, we've got to go save my mom. Javi's probably dead. It's like in that moment, I think a lot of people are like, well, Rocket's kind of a big asshole there. Like, you got to wait for Javi because, of course, it's a movie and that I get that. But the purposeful kind of contradiction there was like, in Rocket's mind, he's just a logical person who's pieced together like, well, chances that Javier survived because of everything we've seen about these zombies, how difficult they are to take down. He's been chased off by two of them. One of these ones is giant. I mean, Bertrand in real life, who plays the zombie who pushes open the gate, he's actually like 6'8". I don't know if you could tell on film, but he's like a massive human being. So he's being chased out by these two folks. And it's been a while. Rocket's weighing his options. It's just like, a soldier in wartime. It's like there is no good answer. There is no good solution. And it's like you could make conceivably either decision there and not technically be wrong. But what is the intention behind making the decision? And that kind of resurrection that you spoke of with him, I think was him recognizing, I'll leave it up for everyone to interpret on their own. But, it may have been him recognizing, just because his decision were different from everyone else's, or in that moment they were, what was the kind of heart behind that decision and the intention behind that decision. But that's just a little, I don't want to go too esoteric into my development of the character, because now that it's out there in the world, it's kind of like it's everyone's character, so everyone's kind of free to decide what that means to them and how they would, I don't know.
To me, watching him and seeing like the different decisions he was making, from ordering the pizza at the pizza place where obviously Claire is like not okay with that. She's saying she's uncomfortable, to his decision to make the storyline all about himself and going to rescue his mom. He just seemed like a very selfish character. But it's like, at what point does selfishness, because we all have some kind of like self-preservation, but like at what point does selfishness go into being an asshole?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the ambiguousness that I thought like the story kind of, I don't know. I wanted to introduce that again. Anime inspired, wanting to pay homage to everything that came before it, but also, give it a little bit of extra drama. And I think in every good zombie movie too, you do have one of these type, and it may be not so on the nose, right? But there's always a situation, or usually a situation, where, a character gets bitten and there's this huge kind of round circle between the survivor and the person who's been bitten. It usually goes through this process of, don't kill me. And then as it kind of gets closer and they're like, okay, kill me. And then, usually they end up not getting killed, and then they bite, like they become the big antagonist and bite like half the other group.
When it came to the ending of the movie, and I thought the fighting scenes were really good, like how the eyes, they were glowing, like that was a lot of fun. It was almost like a final boss scene.
That's awesome.
Was that the intention, like kind of being the final boss, and you have to like level? I mean, he did say like you level up, and there was just a lot of like video game lingo in there as well.
Yeah, that's 100. You 100% got it. Like that. I'm so happy that came through for you. That's 100% the intention. This was our big boss, like our final arc, like, video games, anime, even in like the Marvel and DC movies, like trying to take those elements and interject it into a zombie movie.
Yeah. It was
100%.
super fun. It was really fun. I'm sure everyone did their own stunts, like for the fighting and everything. Did anyone get hurt? Were there ever any casualties on set with anything that happened?
We had, so I think that everyone would say that they were a little more bruised every day that we had, like the day after we did those fight scenes. No serious injuries. I think that was just from, I think Erin specifically mentioned when we were doing that first fight scene with Devin, like, no big injuries. I think our biggest kind of casualty was one of the scenes where the Rockets run into the door in the alleyway, and Christian Casillas, who plays Javier, is holding that bag of swords. And as he ran into the door, there was a small staircase right there, and one of the swords slipped out of its sheath, pinned itself in the step, and landed like flat. And then he brought his foot up into it, and even though the sword was dull, it went through the boot and caught him a little bit. He did get like a little liquid stitch, like at the emergency room, like just a little bit of like the super glue they use.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like super serious, like no damage. And he was back on set the next day. But he's also like, him and Carlo are also like physical Adonises. Like they're always like, ripped and like six packs. And so I just figured he'd be fine no matter what. And Erin that night too, I don't know how she did something with her foot. She kicked probably the same stair, and her toe was bleeding like crazy, like coming out almost of her boot, and everyone was fawning over Christian. And then Erin, like I go to Erin after that and I'm like, okay, Christian's okay. She's like, yeah, but what about me? She holds up this toe and I'm like, oh my God, we got another one. And so like run over with the medical kit, like bandaging up the toe.
Yeah. Did she end up losing a toenail from that, or was it like it was okay?
No, she didn't lose a toenail. We were no toenail lost. So we were good to go.
So I was trying to figure out what all the costumes were at the end. I noticed some Star Wars.
At the end of the film, Rocket was kind of a Attack on Titan, like Eren Yeager inspired type of cosplay. Punky was obviously like a Predator, type cosplay. Christian was a mashup between like a Green Ranger, and when I created those shoulder pads, I really love Dragon Ball Z, so I wanted to make them kind of like the Saiyan armor from Dragon Ball Z. So an anime, I think, done by the same person who does Kill la Kill, but it's like it's like an underground world. It's a whole thing with mechs and stuff, but that's where that came from. Anna Valencia, who plays T, I don't know if we ever named them in the movie, but she's the one who's like the final hit from Rocket when she hits the wall. Her cosplay originally was something totally different, but she said that it wasn't going to work for her. She needed something kind of more breathable. So we went with just like a generic Elektra cosplay because it had to be found in like, 2 or 3 days. And then for Xander, I guess it's up to the audience's interpretation. He was wearing, again, low funds. We were reusing the gis that we used from kind of before they change into their main costumes for the Rockets, that they're like Bleach inspired from the anime Bleach. So he was reusing one of those gis, and I figured it could easily fall into the category of Star Wars or Bleach, depending on how you saw it. But then he made the decision to rip it off, so it didn't really matter at that point. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I was like, yes, give me more of this.
Thought one of them was like a Scooby-Doo character, but with the scarf, I felt like that was like, I thought that was Scooby-Doo.
No, I don't know. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it is completely open to fan interpretation and the viewer's experience because, they're just supposed to represent all the genres and all the IPs and, trying to, show as much love as we can. So if Scooby-Doo read through, that's fantastic. And I will use that in future interviews. I'll be like, yes, Scooby-Doo inspired.
Yes. And like, I was also thinking, like, I've always played a lot of Mortal Kombat. So I guess it was Elektra, but I thought it was like Mortal Kombat character.
I would have loved to I'm a huge Mortal Kombat fan too. Like, Scorpion was on like my top of the list to do, and then I was like, yeah, but it's a very ninja and like get over here. It didn't really scream Javier.
Yeah, it is kind of like more on the asshole side than the good side. So yeah, that's really funny. What's something that you wanted to do that you weren't able to do in production?
So I know for one, at the end of that end battle scene, since we're talking about it, Xander was supposed to go to a back room, like before he grabs Mama Bear or when he grabs Mama Bear and brings her out. And he was supposed to put on like basically a Warhammer 40,000 cosplay, like a giant, super foamed up, cosplay armor situation that was going to push the rockets to the absolute limit because the swords were going to have trouble piercing it. It was going to be this whole big thing. I even was like fantasizing about, maybe they can go in the pool. They're fighting him in the pool, and that's finally like how they stop his mobility. And basically, I wasn't able to finish the armor in time. It was one of those things I was like, I'll have to, I guess, finish it while we're at that location, and just everything kind of went haywire. So it kind of hit the cutting room floor, and we kind of had to go with a pared down version. And just that whole fight scene in general, like I had a lot of the script is very big in that fight, and we got a lot of it. But, just technically speaking, there's stuff that, we only had 3 days to shoot that entire sequence, and that's just not a lot of time to do all those stunts. And we only had our bad guys for 2 of those days.
And
So-
I have 2 other ones. We were supposed to, for the park scene, Kyle had wanted a whole horde of zombies coming down the hill, like rolling down at us and us getting chased into the tunnels by, a whole horde. And the way that was mitigated later on was when we were running through the alley and we enter the tunnels, that door, you see like just shadows of a bunch of zombies and then 1 or 2 at the end charging the door. Those in post were just all Kyle against a green screen. Like many versions of Kyle wearing different outfits and hunching over and running different ways and then putting them all together. So those were our horde of zombies. And then also originally liquor store scene was written at a bar, and we had a bar. We had a location. It was right on the corner. It was great. We had contracts, everything. And maybe it was just a couple days before shooting, the bar owner called and they're like, sorry, you're out. We had a bigger production come in. They're paying us more. Like, we're going with them. And we're like, we have contracts. They're like, you can sue. We're like, we will. Obviously we didn't. We didn't have lawyers. But we, thankfully we were contacted by the production, and they must have been a giant one. We didn't know at all who or anything, but they just wanted to make everything cool. And said, sorry for taking over the location. What were you paying, or what would make up for this, amount? And so we were looking at each other like, I don't know, like $1,000. And they were like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we can pay that in a second. Damn it. We should have asked for so much more. But we took that and we went, right, never be the first in negotiations to say the number. But we ended up going around the corner to this little liquor store that right around the corner from our apartment complex. We frequented a lot because it was a little package store with, stuff. Anyway, it was the night of 4th of July, and the owner was like, you can shoot here. It's going to be when we're closed between like 3 a.m. and sunrise. And so we shot that entire liquor store scene in like 2.5 hours. It was originally longer, more dialogue with the bullies.
I think it turned out really well. That was a fun scene. I don't want to give away the ending or anything like that because I feel like this is still really fresh out there. I want people to go rent it. Where would you prefer people to watch your movie? Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to talk about?
How amazing the response has been, and we're so grateful. And especially for people like yourselves, the podcasters, the independent film reviewers, the horror community, cosplayers and anime fans. We've just been so grateful for the amount of reviews and publicity and then great feedback, even from general audience goers that we've gotten. So it's been a long journey to get to this point, but the release and the reception and the feedback has just been incredible.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with me, and your daughter is adorable.
Thank you for having us.
Wish you guys the best of luck. I'm excited to see the other volumes too that you have.
We hope to be in pre-production on volume 2 this year after a couple of our other projects we're into, but absolutely would love to chat with you anytime. Movies, our own or originals or independent film in general. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And I know Kyle's waving from across the room with Anya. Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a great rest of
Take
your day.
care, Janica. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Now that the world is on fire, let there be no doubt. There is a point for all of those free of this curse to join us.